Hey guys, welcome to today's video. We're going to be going over Deshaun Watson and his best landing places, his top 5 landing places. Where should he go? And with that said, before we get started, please drop a quick like and a sub on today's video. That would really help my channel grow. I'd really appreciate that. And now let's dive right into the video, and I hope you enjoy. So before we get started, definitely the Deshaun Watson trade rumors have, settled down a little bit. But nonetheless, with all the harassment scandals and all these allegations that are coming out about Deshaun Watson, it's probably less likely he gets traded. It's probably that simple. Teams are going to be less inclined to go out and spend a lot of draft picks on him when, he's in a little bit of legal trouble, and we're not really going to dive into that, but just keep that in mind. The chance of a trade is probably less likely, but nonetheless, let's dive right into it. So let's start off here. First team that we're going to look at is the Chicago Bears. Reading this article, is there any price too high for the Bears to pay for Deshaun Watson? And the thing is, I think Deshaun Watson and the Bears makes a lot of sense for a few reasons. One, the Bears reportedly have been willing to give the most for Deshaun Watson. That means most picks, most draft capital, most compensation for Deshaun Watson, which is kind of surprising because the Bears are not a team that you think has a lot of draft capital. I mean, you think teams like the Jets, the Dolphins, other teams that we'll talk about later in today's video, have that draft capital to get a deal done. However, Deshaun Watson to the Bears makes sense for the Bears too. I mean, I think that, Deshaun Watson would want to go to a team that has a legit playoff chance with him, and a team like the Bears would have a legit playoff chance. I mean, their defense has been one of the better ones in the NFL over the past few seasons, and that would continue. All the guys on that defense are still around. They have a good secondary, good defensive line, good guys up front who can get pressure. It's really been their offense the past few seasons that's been the issue, and it's really been the quarterback position more specifically that's been a real problem. Their offensive line isn't great. Running back situation is questionable, and the guys on the outside are also a little bit questionable. But overall, I think Deshaun Watson going to a team like the Bears makes sense because you add Deshaun Watson to the Bears, and they're a legit playoff contender. They're a legit playoff contender because they've got a good defense. They now have a good offense because Deshaun Watson, even with barely any weapons last year in Houston, or with older weapons, or with guys that you wouldn't consider great players, guys like Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, who are, they're good, but they're not like elite wide receivers, was still able to get the job done and had arguably the best season of his career, throwing for the most passing yards in the NFL. So I think the Bears make a lot of sense. They're a team that needs a quarterback who's really, an elite quarterback play away from, making a real run for things. So I think Deshaun Watson and the Bears makes a lot of sense. Do I think it'll happen? Who knows? Another team I'd like to look at is the New York Jets. And the New York Jets make sense to me for a few reasons. One, it's the Jets, right? They don't really have a quarterback. Sam Darnold, I don't think, is the long-term answer for them. And with that said, they need a quarterback, right? They need an elite quarterback, and they've got the draft capital to do it. They've got obviously the second overall pick in this year's draft. They've got the 23rd overall pick in this year's draft, and they have future draft capital too. They have 3 picks in the first 34 picks of the draft this year. So I'm sure if they sent those to the Houston Texans and a future first, they could definitely get a deal done. Would Houston want to do it? Probably not. But once again, the Jets need a true franchise quarterback. Deshaun Watson's that guy, and he goes to New York where it's a big lights, bright lights, and everything's big. And I think Deshaun Watson would want to go to New York. Good opportunity for marketing and media and ads and stuff like that. But also, he goes to a team that, is in desperate need of a franchise quarterback. The Jets are a team that has the draft capital to get a deal done. And they're also a team that, I think is attractive for Deshaun Watson to go to just because they're in New York, right? Those New York teams are always going to be attractive for players to go to because, you get the big media, big lights, and big stage. So at the end of the day, I think Deshaun Watson going to the Jets, that's a team that has a real possibility because they have the draft capital to do it. Next up, let's look at the Carolina Panthers. And the Carolina Panthers, to me, are another team that makes sense. They're a team that definitely needs a quarterback. They're a team that definitely has some draft capital to get a deal done. And they're a team that's willing to give up a lot for a guy like Deshaun Watson. I think I saw a report earlier this offseason where it said the Panthers owner was willing to go all in on Deshaun Watson, give up everything. And I've seen even mock trades and mock stuff where they're willing to give up Christian McCaffrey and 3 first-round picks to get a deal done. And I think that would make sense if you're the Carolina Panthers. This is a young team with a young defense, but they've got a really good offense. And imagine inserting Deshaun Watson into an offense with TJ Moore and Robbie Anderson and
even Christian McCaffrey, if, they're able to retain him in any kind of trade, I think that would be really scary. I think Carolina is definitely on the rise, and Deshaun Watson would help expedite that process, and then give them a franchise guy for the next 10 seasons. So at the end of the day, I think Deshaun Watson and the Panthers, that's another really good move. I just don't think, once again, I don't think that the Houston Texans are going to be willing to give up Deshaun Watson in any situation. Now, though, let's go to the Miami Dolphins. And this is a team that makes a lot of sense for me. I'm a big Tua Tagovailoa fan, and you can see that up there. But at the same time, Tua Tagovailoa could end up being a guy like Deshaun Watson. But Deshaun Watson is a guy like Deshaun Watson right now. And I know that Dolphins fans are split on this, and there's guys in both parties. But in my opinion, if you can give up, this year's first round picks and next year's first round pick for Deshaun Watson. I mean, remember, the Dolphins have pick 3, pick 18, and then whatever next year's pick is. And they've also got the Houston Texans second round pick, which is pick number 35, I want to say. Right? Yeah, 35. So they got a lot of draft capital this year, and they're probably the team with the most draft capital to do it this season, because they also have 2 second rounders too. I don't think the Jets have that. But with that said, I mean, the Dolphins, they're once again a quarterback play away from being real playoff contenders. They were 10-6 last year with Tua and Ryan Fitzpatrick. And imagine them getting a guy like Deshaun Watson, to add next to Devontae Parker in that offense. And then you've got Preston Williams coming back, Mike Gesicki. That could be kind of scary. And then that defense was fantastic last year with Xavier Howard being an interception machine. So I think this is actually a better landing spot for him than a team like Chicago, due to the fact that, this defense is good. I think Chicago's defense might be a little bit better just, in yards wise, where Miami's a little bit better in turnovers wise. But the offense that Miami has, and the pieces that they have there in, especially in the offensive line with that young offensive line, but it's definitely an offensive line on the rise. It just makes a little bit more sense for Deshaun Watson, especially, with the culture that Brian Flores is building in Miami. A guy like Deshaun Watson would definitely want to be a part of that. And Deshaun Watson's already expressed interest in joining the Dolphins. He said he'd be open to it earlier this offseason. However, I don't really know if the Dolphins want to move on from Tua. It looks like Brian Flores and Chris Greer are pretty happy with working with Tua and seeing how that builds. But nonetheless, Deshaun Watson and the Dolphins is definitely a possibility that makes a lot of sense, and it would definitely put the Dolphins in that Super Bowl conversation.
And finally, let's look at the San Francisco 49ers. And you might be saying the San Francisco 49ers, they just traded up into the top 3 of the draft. Why would they go out and get Deshaun Watson when it looks like they're set on one of those top 4 quarterbacks in the draft? Maybe top 5, maybe they want to get Mac Jones, who knows? But nonetheless, I mean, I still think it makes sense for the 49ers to go out and get Deshaun Watson. I mean, obviously, I think it's pretty obvious at this point that Jimmy Garoppolo is not the long-term answer in San Francisco anymore. It doesn't look like that. That's why they gave up a ton of draft capital to go up into the top 3 and maybe get a quarterback. But also, this could work another way, too. The San Francisco 49ers, now they have the 3rd overall pick. They've got a ton of draft capital this year, right? They've got the 3rd overall pick. Next few years, not a ton of first-round picks. But maybe the Houston Texans would listen to an offer of the first round pick of San Francisco this year, so the 3rd overall pick, Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe this year's second rounder, next year's second rounder the year after. Throw in a few 3rd round picks, maybe a 4th round pick too. Give a boatload of picks to the San Francisco to the Houston Texans for Deshaun Watson. Sure, you don't really have the 1st round picks to do it anymore, but nonetheless, the 3rd overall pick, a really solid quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe that gets a deal done. I still think the fit in San Francisco makes a ton of sense for Deshaun Watson. I mean, that defense is really good. They're an elite quarterback away from being a legit Super Bowl contender. And I think, the pieces they have on offense with George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk had a nice year last year. The strong running game, they re-signed Trent Williams. So overall, the offense is there. They're a really good quarterback away from it. And the defense is, they're going to be back and better next year because Nick Bosa is going to be healthy. They're going to get better on the defense side of the football. They did lose some of their corners, but overall, I still think the defense is going to be solid. But at the end of the day, I really like this fit from Deshaun Watson to the 49ers. It's really just, the trade, the draft capital isn't going to really be there, but I still think a trade could make sense. At the end of the day, though, I think a Deshaun Watson trade is less likely now with all these, harassment allegations, but nonetheless, I think we outlined some really good destinations for him. I think Chicago's a good option, although, they did end up getting Andy Dalton. I still think that they could still go out and get Deshaun Watson, somehow find a way to move Nick Foles' contract to free up the cap space. But also, I think Carolina, another good option. Miami, good option. They've invested, more draft picks. They moved back in the draft, added some more draft picks, so they've even got more draft picks to do it. And we also talked about some other teams. But at the end of the day, I still think the Deshaun Watson trade is probably less likely. However, I don't think Houston should trade him. When you have a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, you don't trade him. He's an elite quarterback, elite arm talent. He's able to make a ton of stuff out of nothing. I mean, just look at the weapons he had last year. Will Fuller was pretty good, but I mean, Brandon Cooks was okay. But other than that, the weapons weren't there, and Deshaun Watson was still able to produce at a high level, led the league in passing yards. So I just don't think that the Texans trading him makes sense for Houston, because you don't really trade away an elite quarterback. And although there are all these harassment allegations, I think that's gonna also play a part in this. I don't think teams are gonna want him as much. That's another risk that they're gonna have to take. But at the end of the day, I think this is gonna be a very interesting situation to see how it all plays out.
And with that said, that's pretty much going to end the video for today. Did you agree with my analysis? Why or why not? Leave your comments and thoughts in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Also, if you're new around here, please drop a like and a sub on today's video. I'd really appreciate that. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. And until next time, see ya.